This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for KYaks.Guru with Ken Ludmer, and he has a very special guest with us today, and I am so proud that she's with us. Her name is Amy Ferris, and once Amy gets going, I think Ken and I can just sit back and relax the rest of the day, because Amy, as I told Ken before we went online, when you put something out in your blog or on Facebook, the rest of us don't have to say a word because you really do speak for us. So welcome the infamous Amy Ferris, who is outspoken. She's an author. You teach writing. What don't you do, Amy?
I don't do the laundry, but Ken does that. So I'm grateful for that. No.
Okay, I can just about hear Amy.
Yeah, Amy has to talk just a little bit louder for us. That's all.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, that's better. Much better.
Okay.
So
we're having problems with all of this stuff around today. So
okay, well,
good that I'm here.
Well, hey, that's technology. So you and Ken have known each other for quite a while. How did the two of you get to know each other?
Me and Ken Ludmer?
Yes.
I've known Ken Ludmer, I don't know how many years, but my Ken and Ken Ludmer have known each other since they're kids. So I met Ken Ludmer maybe 8 or 9 years ago, something like that.
A little longer than that. A little longer than that.
So, well, my book came out in 2008, Marrying George Clooney. So probably 11 years.
Yeah, that's about right.
So what is it that you find interesting about Ken Ludmer? Now, I know we're confusing everybody because you have another Ken in your life who many of us know of. Most of us haven't met him, but there's something special about Ken Ludmer. Can you explain it to us?
I'll have him explain his specialness to you.
Oh, wow.
He's very talented, and he's very creative, and he's kind of like a jack of all trades. You know, he can do a lot of things. He's a writer, he's a therapist, he's a traveler, he's a storyteller. He's, as my husband would say, a good man.
Yeah.
So, Ken, in response
Don't forget the bartender.
I'll let you fill that in.
Guitar player.
I'll let you fill in all of that stuff, Ken.
Yeah.
I'll let you fill it all in.
No, I think one of the things that Amy and I are attracted to one another about is that there's a deep soul in Amy that I respect, and an honesty. You don't find many people that can show all their blotches, talk about all their thoughts that most people hide. And I think that's her genius. That's what appeals to everybody. When she says, you know, she's online waiting for at the checkout counter, and there's 3 women that are, you know, yakking about somebody else, and she's getting annoyed, and then she'll see somebody in front of her, and then her attitude was almost the same as theirs, and she admits it, and then sees that that's not the way to go. It relates to all of us, because we all see the parts of ourselves that, you know, we'd rather not broadcast, rather not put out there. And I think the similarity with Amy and I is that when I wrote my first book, Insanity Begins at Home, it's about a therapist's relationship with his mother, a male therapist. Now, most male therapists don't talk. Well, you got the wrong guy if that's your therapist you came to see here. So I talk. And then my friend Maria Sedio said to me, you know, male therapists never talk about their mothers. And you've had such a battle with yours. Why don't you write about it? And then compared with Amy, who had, you know, similar difficulties in early childhood with parents and stuff like that. We both felt such catharsis when we started to write and get out all the stuff that's inside. you realize a lot of everybody else relates to that. It just reverberates in them. And they said, you know, I've been thinking about saying that about my family, or I wish I would have written that, or that gives me an idea. I think I'm going to do something different now. And I think there's the commonality between Amy and I. Well, would you agree, Mrs. Ferris?
I would agree. Absolutely. I would totally agree.
So, Amy,
Yes.
this morning I posted on Facebook that last night I was watching an ABC program called What Would You Do? And on that program, they were talking about adults who reach a certain age having difficulty getting employed. And I know that you've had a long, good career, but do you see that in today's society that all of a sudden you hit a certain milestone birthday and you're sort of out on a limb?
You know, I'm lucky, Karen, that I get to write, and I have a really, really good career. But I do have a lot of friends who are suffering right now from that, from ageism, from being considered too old. I also know a lot of men who are really struggling right now with being in their 60s, and because of the pandemic, they are not working and more than likely won't go back to work, right?
Right.
And so I think I know that Barbara is doing she's out there fighting like a crazy person for ageism and all of that, which is phenomenal. She's so phenomenal. And, and a few other people are doing that too. I worry about my friends who are at a certain age and filled with amazing life and filled with incredible passion and filled with incredible experience, and that they are not going to be embraced. That's sad. That's really, really sad to me.
Well, and I want to thank you for a lot of the encouragement you provide on Facebook.
Thank you, Karen.
And anybody who has seen anything that Amy writes, number one, yes, you can be very vocal and tell it like it is. And I've learned to use the F word.
Yeah,
I
very
thought it
salty,
would.
very salty.
Yeah. But what I do notice is that you lift other women up. And I know in the workplace, I never saw that happening. I saw women pushing other women down. So
Or
Or competing, yeah,
yeah.
scratching.
So what is it about you that, finds that inner soul to encourage the rest of us?
what is it about me? I think what it is about me is that I struggled, when I was younger in friendships. And there was always a lot of competition, and there is a lot of competition. Women compete with each other, whether it's for a job, whether it's for a guy, whether it's, to be seen, whether it's to be heard. Not all women. I'm fortunate that I have a group of women in my life who are so generous and so lifting. But I think women can be very jealous. I think women have a tendency at times to be very competitive because they don't think there's enough to go around, right?
Okay.
And so I made a promise to myself, because my mother was very competitive with me. And I made a promise that I would never be like her. And in order for me to not be like her, I had to be generous and kind and non-competitive. And I had to root other women on. And I have done that pretty much my whole adult life. When I had opportunities, when I was given an opportunity, I always made sure that my girlfriends came along for the ride, that they were given opportunities too. It's like, Karen, when with the podcast, it's like me saying, hey, Sherry and Susie, and, there's something about saying, here's a group of people let's lift them. And then I just kind of walk away and you do all the heavy lifting, but that says everything about you too, that you come in and embrace those women and those men and say, yes, let's do a podcast, and I just kind of walk away and you kind of just, keep carrying them and lifting them. And that's the best of who we are.
And that's the one thing that I so love about you. And I wish you didn't live so far away. And when this pandemic
Not
is
so
over,
far, by the way.
but hopefully the pandemic will be over soon and we can, all get together. But what I love about you is that generosity. And I've always had that inside of me, but because I was pushed down, I didn't know how to bring it out.
Right.
You've taught me that. And I don't even realize sometimes that I'm doing it until somebody mentions it to me. So, you have been a great, great influence, not just on me, but on many other people as well. And, I just want to encourage everybody to, follow Amy because especially in the next couple months, I think we're going to learn a lot. Because I loved your comment yesterday, about Biden and Harris, and we all have to stand behind them.
You know what was extraordinary? That comment, which I kind of just wrote instantly, was shared over 1,000 times.
Wonderful.
That was pretty amazing that all of a sudden it was like everywhere. But, we all need to be generous. If we have extra, let's help those who don't. If we can be kinder to people who need that kind of reassurance, let's do that. We have an abundance of generosity within our own lives, and some of us can be generous in terms of words. Some of us can be generous in terms of money. Some of us can be generous in terms of Spirit. Yeah. It's really important. It's very, very important.
It was a real battle for me to get to that position where I could comfortably feel generous. I was always a warm-blooded. I always felt for the underdog. And, it was like an emotional connection to people who struggled. But my mother was very cheap and defensive. And she always felt if somebody was kind to her, it was like the New Yorker. You go up to somebody and you say, how can I help you? And they say, get away from me. What do you want? It's like people were setting her up. She always felt if someone was asking her for something or doing something for her, there was always an ulterior motive. And it always had to do with being used or taken advantage of. And growing up in that environment, it made me very defensive. I had a shield around me because I was afraid people were going to take advantage of me. I knew I was kind of a vulnerable soul. And I overdid it. I went the other way until finally, a lot of therapy and stuff, I realized that I really am a generous soul. And it's mostly of spirit, of helping people. That you see somebody struggling and you want to make it better for them. Why else, it's a whole part of the Jewish tribe, is we take care of the community. We take care of one another. We reach out wherever we can with whatever we have. And, I've been lucky enough to be able to get into people's insides and help them rearrange things so that they have less anxiety, less depression, less fear, less worries. They do more, they fret less. And then now, as I'm an old man and I've got a little wealth, I'm able to share it. I'm able to, set up a foundation and help people. It's like not an easy road. And I think Amy and I can both relate to the fact that, it's a battle all the time to get to your better self. And I think she's an example that she did it and she's showing others how to do it.
And Ken is very, very generous. Ken is an incredibly kind and generous man. And he is. And I think that's one of, that's an extraordinary quality in a human being. You know, to be kind, to be generous, to be thoughtful, to, if your friends are struggling, you know, you kind of reach out and say, what can I do for you? You know, I think, you know, I think that's who the best of us are. You know, when we see somebody or we love somebody and they're having a hard time, you know, it's not that hard to be really generous, and it just isn't.
It really, you're right. It's not that hard, but if you look around, there are so many people today who choose not to be that way. It's almost like what you said, Ken. You know, you struggled in the beginning because of your upbringing. And I've met a number of people who say to me, you know, why are you doing what you're doing, Karen? Why do you keep looking for more people to share their stories to help others? And it's the only thing that I can do that I know is going to help the rest of the world. And so this is my form of kindness. But I too was brought up, you know, looking over my shoulder, wondering, you know, was that person really being kind to me, or were they trying to use me? And
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
and you know, I'll never forget this. My mother got sick 4 years ago. And in the first couple weeks, she had no idea that she was ill, had no idea she was blind, had no idea that any day was going to be her last day. And she was talking to me and she said, you know, you keep going in the other room doing these interviews. What are you doing? She said, are you a famous radio person? And my answer to her was, oh, yes, Mom, I'm very famous. And her smile just was like ear to ear. And she said, well, don't let anybody tell you any different. And yet, my mother and father did not want me to be a communications master or go into broadcasting. But at the end of her life, she was happy for me. But all those years, I kept looking over my shoulder. Is my mother going to approve? So there are a lot of people out there that even though it's easy to be kind and nice, they don't find it in themselves. How do
But
we help them?
Karen, you just said something which is so important. It's I think kindness is born from being treated badly. A lot of times, you know, like generosity and kindness. I grew up and, you know, we struggled. My family really, really struggled. My dad was going through a very hard time. And, you know, and one thing that I saw, you know, even though our family is estranged and my brother and I don't talk, what I learned from my mother and father was how to love each other. They loved each other through the worst of times. My mother pawned her jewelry to buy my father. It was like living in an O. Henry story. And I think, you know, and I'm very fortunate because I am married to a man who is incredibly kind. You know, he's a kind man. He is a good man, you know. And I think kindness is something that is really, it is born out of being mistreated. It's like, you know, we become advocates when we are in situations, whether it's sexual assault or, you know, something really horrific, you know, something rises up in us, right?
Right.
And we become an advocate for women who go through the same thing. And I think if we can turn our suffering into helping others, if we can turn, that's what I do. That is my mantra, you know, mistakes into mission. And I think that people are scared. You know, people, when you're filled with fear, you don't know whether to turn left or right. And so very often we don't do anything. And a lot of people are so scared at this very moment.
Right.
What they have is going to be taken from them. Look at the world we're living in.
Right.
Right. There were yesterday I wrote, you know, I've been putting a lot about white people do something, you know, in response to the Black Lives Matter, in response to Trump's being able to bring out all the worst of the bottom line fears of fear of strangers, fear of others, the whole anti-immigration, anti-Black, anti-small guy, that we now are faced with a challenge of repair, is that as we move past Trump, which I think is going to happen, we have a lot of damage done and a lot of prejudice is still out there. And it's up to those who aren't to actively engage with prejudice whenever you hear it, whenever you see it, and do it in such a way that you're not attacking the person who has that belief. Because, prejudice and this kind of jealousy, fear, anxiety comes from fear and ignorance. If you don't know about somebody and you're afraid they're going to come and take something from you, you can categorize them, you can stereotype them. And learning to undo that is by example. And one by one, we could each challenge somebody's prejudice with an alternate view, give them another way. In family therapy, we call it reframing. You have a lousy picture and somebody's telling you about their lousy picture. Well, you give it back to them in a new form. You say, well, your picture is pretty common. It's not, your picture is full of hope. There are many families like your families that have gotten better. And there are many people that originally didn't like Puerto Ricans and didn't like Cubans and but then they lived with them and they learned to realize that they're really pretty much the same as you are. They want the same thing. So I think if we can find a way to use our kindness, to use our spirit, to actively engage. I tell people, you have to write, write the newspaper, you got to go to the town hall meetings, you have to speak up, you have to change your local police's prejudice attitude. You have to do whatever you can. You can contribute emotionally, financially to organizations that are already out there doing that, but at least do something.
Yes, absolutely.
Amy, when a number of months ago, when we first met, you started out with a podcast about redemption. And that is so important for so many people.
Yeah.
Because like you both have said, and I've said, we've gone through many different things in our lives. And sometimes we've done them right. Sometimes we haven't. And sometimes other people thought we were wrong. And being able to redeem yourself, look at your faults and change them is so important. And yet, don't you find that a lot of people don't let other people redeem themselves?
Oh,
They just hold on
absolutely.
to those faults.
Well, because I think we have to we have to remain victims, and we have to make people, the bad guys or the bad women. We do, it's, as long as we keep people in their place, we feel powerful. It really is not about, I wrote this not that long ago, and I wrote it to a friend of mine who was very damaged because of the Me Too movement and wrongfully damaged. We sit in dark movie theaters and we root on these people that, like come out of prison, and we want them to do good, and we're in a dark movie theater and we're rooting them on, and we're hoping that they, get another chance, and then they get another chance, and we're like screaming and wishing them well, right? But in real life, in the sunlight, we don't do that. People come out of prison and we want them to pay for that debt for the rest of their lives. Or, somebody makes a mistake, or some guy, I heard, years ago, I heard somebody say about Hollywood, it's a town that wishes you well, but not too well. And I think that that's a lot of what happens, Karen, is that, redemption is something that is so very important. And taking responsibility is super important. I don't think you can really redeem yourself unless you actually own your shit. But then it's not up to us to keep throwing that back in someone's face. You know, we're all capable of being so much greater and bigger and more. And it's actually our mistakes and all the things that we fuck up with. And that's what makes us extraordinary. It's not like having $8 million and like, you know, a big house. It's how you got there.
Right.
You know, it's like Oprah Winfrey is this amazing, amazing human being, but she's, you know, if you look at her life story, you think, how did she do that?
Exactly.
She didn't just become this Black billionaire, you know, massive product name. She struggled. She had a hard life. She was raped. She had a kid. All of these things that we don't talk about. You know, she really, truly redeemed her life.
Yeah. It's the core of change. In therapy, people come into the office with a lot of pain. And a lot of people come in with an attitude of, they take on a victim position. Poor me, look what happened to me, I never had a chance, blah, 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 blah. And they would find with me that I was not very sympathetic to their victim position. And I said, because if I support you being a victim, then you're going to want to stay there. You're going to stay with the cloud over your head. You look at people like, look at the example Trump leads. He's a man of privilege, born in absolute wealth, has lived in wealth his whole life, and his emotional attitude is he's a victim. Poor me. They don't love me. They don't understand me. They don't take, and he has this idea that it's not his fault that he's the way he is. It's everybody else's fault. And that's what a victim does. They tell you that it's the other people who are holding me down. Everybody else is doing it to me, and they take no responsibility. When you start to take responsibility for yourself, you're able to admit your faults, admit what you didn't do, not so much what you did. It's what you could have done or what you should have done that you didn't do. And in there lies your own redemption. That you admit where you are, and that's the first step of change. If you look at anybody with addiction, you have to work down a long road to get to day one. And day one, you're no longer a victim, and now you got a job, and you have a lot of work ahead of you, and, you know, welcome to the rest of us.
You know,
Absolutely.
you're hitting on the nose, Ken. A lot of us, as we've grown up, and I'm talking about our generation because you, Amy, and I are in that same group. I was brought up believing that, you know, mistakes were bad. You know, you always had to do it right the first time. And when you admit your fault, which I was always the first one to do in my house, you know, yeah, I broke it. I said that word. But all I did was get punished for it. Okay.
Yeah.
But yet my husband grew up in a family where if he said, yes, I broke it, or I said it, or it was my fault, his parents then said, okay, let's learn from this. And I'm so lucky that I met him because he has taught me over the last 36 years, you know, how not to be the victim. And I'm not blaming my parents 100% that I got punished for all those things because I did those things. But if I had been taught, you know, instead of breaking that ashtray or that glass, what could you have done to prevent it? And that's what I try to do with my sons and the people that I work with. You know, how can we correct that behavior?
That's, you know, and what you just said about, you know, it being your fault. I think a lot of us grew up in that environment. You know, it's like taking the blame, even if we weren't even in the vicinity.
And women do that more than men. Women take blame, take responsibility. Yeah, if a guy louses up, she wonders what she did to make him louse up.
Of course.
And men don't do that.
That's going to change. That's about to change. We have to change that for sure.
Well, we do have to change it. And I think the younger generation, the millennials and the generation that's following them, they are learning to stand up for themselves. And it's because of them that I've become, more independent. But again, a lot, like I said, had to do with my husband, who the first time I started blaming myself for something, he would look at me and he'd go, "You weren't even there. Why are you blaming yourself?" And I had to think about it. And it's like, oh, I don't.
Because I was trained to do so.
Exactly. Um, so it's our job now to stop taking the blame. And if we do make a mistake, learn from it.
Oh, without a doubt. And we're always going to make mistakes. I mean, none of us are mistake proof, and we're always going to make mistakes. And I think when we start looking at mistakes as something really good, rather than something awful and shameful, then that just changes the entire situation, right?
Absolutely.
We're all imperfect. So, which brings me to this, Karen. What do you think is going to happen in the next couple of months with Kamala and being, it's starting already.
It started before most of us knew that she was selected.
It's starting already. Yes.
So, one of the things I've seen on social media, the good part of social media, is that we have people coming out of the woodwork who I didn't think would be supportive of this ticket. And they're now saying, you know what? We need to make a change. Biden may not have been my first choice, but guess what? With Camilla, he is my choice. They see this as a future ticket. And that's exactly how I look at it too.
I think it's well balanced.
Yes.
I think it appeals to a lot of it. Both of them have a lot of integrity and a lot of good-hearted history in working for government and trying to change things. They're both quality people, and that really comes through now.
Yeah, and they're true America, if you think about it. Okay. Yeah. I mean, she struggled, growing up. And he has struggled in his adult life. I mean, he's had a lot of things happen in his own family.
Amazing tragedy.
So, I feel that they are real people. I can.
Yeah, they have compassion.
Absolutely. I really wish I could understand people who are still Trump supporters, because I'd like them to really explain to me when they say he's made the economy better. I want them to walk into my house where my husband, who's an IT professional, he's lucky if he has a job a week, and he's independent. But the economy is not that great, and the jobs are few and far between. And now with the pandemic, it's even worse. And I just want one of them to really show me some facts so that maybe I could understand.
Yeah, well, facts don't matter a lot of the Trump supporters, if you really look, they believe the lies. The man lies every single day, and provable, easy stuff he lies about. And so if that doesn't matter to them and they still like him, it's not about reality. It's not about facts. It's about emotion. He represents their version of, he's there for me. This is my secret protector. I've never had one. I now have one. You can't trust the politician, but this lying, Canadian sleazebag, I trust him, because you know what? He's a lot like me. And I think a lot of the people that if you hear some of the ones that are, wearing the flag and all the stuff like that, they tell the interviewer, it doesn't matter what he does or what he says. I love him. And how do you beat that?
I think that there's also another piece to this, which is these are people who live in fear all the time. I was thinking
they're coming for your guns. They're coming for your daughter. They're coming for your money.
Not just that. They never felt secure in their life. They never had. I would wager, that their family history is really filled with bullies and being beaten to the ground. And, I think the one thing that Donald Trump has given a lot of people is a very false sense of power. That he's given them this, opportunity to wave their flag and to wear white tents. And, he's given them the opportunity to show their true sense of self. It's the antithesis of people who empower you, right? It's like when you're with somebody who is so fucking powerful and it just sparks and ignites something amazing in you. That's what he's doing, but it's based in fear. And he is igniting all of this anger and all of this hate. And that stuff has always been here. It's that meanness, that jealousy, that pettiness, that person is taking my job. It's what Ken said, you're going to take my gun. Nobody is taking your gun. But why do you feel that you can take our children in a school shooting and not do anything about it? It's such a crazy imbalance. But, I also think that Donald Trump, what he has triggered in a lot of women, and I know, Karen, you've talked about this a lot, is he triggers that because he's such a bully, he triggers, all of that uneasiness in women, all of that kind of creepiness in women, that women like, ooh, this guy reminds me of that guy from high school, or that guy, he's just a fear magnet. He rages on, and he, like Ken said, he lies every single day. And even the stuff that he talked about yesterday about, the China plague, and that if Biden is elected, we're going to have to learn to speak Chinese. And people believe that. And even smart people, right? It's like not just like people who don't read or just watch Fox. We know people who are smart people, right, who are going around talking about the China flu. He has really made an art out of ignorance and stupidity. He really has.
And not taking any responsibility.
No.
Bottom line, he takes no responsibility. He's never admitted he's made a mistake as president. Not one thing. Even though he lies and gets caught lying, he then says that's fake news. You're making that up. Oh, it's incredible. I mean, my friend's the therapist. We have a ball with him. I mean, he's a real easy case study. I mean, when you have a malignant narcissist, there's someone that cannot look at themselves, has no ability. The mirror that he looks in himself is completely shattered. He only sees what he wants to see, not what's there. And then, if you sell that, then other people, they don't have to see it either. They don't have to see it in him. They don't have to see it in themselves. And they can all get together and have a wonderful meeting by pointing fingers at everybody else. And there's your Trump base.
Well, I think you've put it all together very easily for us here. We started out talking about the fact that we have to take responsibility. We have to see our own faults and address them as what they really are. He does not. And I think that's what riles us. And I think that's what gets Amy to write some of the wonderful things that she writes. Because, I could sit here and stew all day and, trying to think of what can I say that won't get me in trouble. And then I realize after I read something Amy writes, you know what? She's not in trouble, although she does get in Facebook jail occasionally. You're saying what so many of us are feeling.
Right.
And I don't want to live in fear. And that's why, I am really supportive of this Democratic ticket. And, it's not so much that I'm a Democrat. I just want us to be able to live in harmony. and there's going to be a few fights along the way. I get it. But we can't be, so separated as we are today.
I want my country back. I
Yeah.
really want, not that it was the greatest, I mean, we're founded on racism. We have a horrible history, but yet there is a spirit in America of generosity. There's a spirit of, the Statue of Liberty stands for something, and we have to get back to that. There is where my belief in my country was. And hopefully, we can get back to a more humanitarian view of one another, a kindness, a sharing. It would be so exciting to see a diversity of government now, where you find Asians, and you find Mexicans, and you find blacks, and you find Latinos from everywhere, and you find people from Eastern Europe, and people that left Russia, and people who are leaving Korea, and give them the opportunity that they were supposed to have, and make it work, where we don't block people from coming here. We encourage them to come here and join the melting pot. That's the country I want back, and I don't even focus on the Trumpers anymore. I really, although I've been taught in the last 3 years to fight them tooth and nail, they're just a percentage, and they're not the majority. And I hope this election shows that they're not the majority, and that we move on and let them go back to wherever they are. But we won't be feeding them anymore.
I think Biden did something that was so extraordinary. I think, and Alexia, my friend Alexia LaFortune, posted this, and it really struck me. He was not threatened or intimidated by Kamala, and his choosing her also showed what a generous soul he is. Right. Because that moment, during the debate, when she turned to him and kind of, brought him down, another guy or another person wouldn't want her, would say, you know what, you just shamed me in front of the entire, but he set an example yesterday for how we should be in this world. That if someone takes you down, you can still love them and honor them and respect them and ask them to be your running mate. He showed the world yesterday about forgiveness, about tenacity, about working together. He showed the world something yesterday that is the antithesis of what we now have in the White House. Yeah. And I think, I think it was I think people who weren't, Karen, even her fans of her rather, really was so excited yesterday. I think it was like the joy that people felt for the first time in how many months. A friend wrote on Facebook that she felt like she exhaled for the first time in over 3 years.
Yes.
Right.
But I do think it's so amazing that here is a man who chose this woman who took him down a few notches, and that he was able to come back and say, this woman she's the perfect one.
It reminds me of what family is all about. In families, people, the better families, the ones that, let me just make my point. You disagree in families. Families scream and yell at one another. They have arguments. They each have their own view of what's going on. And in the better families, what happens is somebody will say, did everybody have their say? Yeah, okay, well, let's eat. And everybody sits down at the table, and all of that went away. And now we're all one family, and we're eating and enjoying one. And the whole emotional tone is, we're allowed to be different. We're allowed to have different opinions. We're allowed to fight and stand up for what we believe. But we're still all part of something that's bigger. And that's what this country needs now. We need to be all part of something that's bigger.
Ken, just to, go on that, what you just said, I also think that there are a lot of families, like my family, that would beat you to the ground for having a different opinion or standing up for yourself. I think it's really, really important that, there are two types of families. The ones we choose now, the people in our life that we get to choose and have in our life and love, and the other families that are toxic.
The one we had, yeah.
I think how brave I am that I stood up to that toxicity and that meanness and that ugliness. I think there are families that look like Trump, the Trump world, where he's the bully. And then there are the families that you're talking about that look more like the Biden and Harris, where they can actually get along, and take something that was, kind of difficult and uneasy and turn it into something really great, but I do have a lot of friends out there who are estranged from their families, and and I'm proud of them for not taking that negativity in anymore. That's a killer. That's a killer.
When I wrote Insanity Begins at Home, it's all about the relationships at home that make you crazy. And my mother made me crazy because she was a perfectionist, narcissist. You couldn't please her no matter what. Everything you did, she criticized. And I had to get away from her. And I battled with her and battled with her and battled with her until finally my fourth attempt at therapy, where I realized what the hell I was running from was her in me, the part of me that was like that. And I hated it. I hated that part of me because I saw myself in her. I saw her in me. And therapists helped me identify that voice that was criticizing me, putting me down all the time. And I was able to separate that and say, I'm not that. That's who she thought I was. That's who she was. But that's not me. And I will be the rest of my life different from that. And once I got to that point, and that only took 60 years, I was different. And I've been different now for the last 18 years. That I have changed the way in which I organize my thoughts and my beliefs about people. And I look at the commonality that I have with people rather than look for difference. And I think that's where, what we've been talking about today is our challenge and our better selves and our kindness and our spirit, that we want to be able to put all the people who are different, who had tough times. We don't want to point fingers at them, and we don't want to create chaos anymore. What we want to do is mend and heal.
Well, I think you wrapped it up right there, Ken. You told us exactly what we've talked about, but I think we have to have Amy on again in the future because you have a lot to.
And she looks so well today. I mean, this is the best I've ever seen her.
Aw, I think he's teasing Amy.
Oh, you don't think I know that? But Karen, you look wonderful. You look so healthy and beautiful and glowing. You do.
Well, I have a lot to be thankful for,
You've gone through a very rough patch, health-wise and all of it, and yes.
But
you're looking good.
So I really want to thank Amy Ferris for being on the show today. I mean, you see the quality that she brings to a conversation.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, love.
Thank you. Well, I'll see you next week. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye, Karen.
Bye-bye.